My mother-in-law legally stole our house while I was in the hospital having a baby. I've been sitting on this for weeks trying to figure out if I'm crazy. I've told 3 people in real life. My mom, my best friend from college, and a lawyer. All 3 of them had the same reaction, which was some version of stunned silence followed by, "You need to do something about this immediately." So here I am, doing something about it. At least, I'm starting to. And I guess writing it all out is part of that. My name isn't really important, but I'll go by Nina. I'm 30. I live in the Raleigh area, North Carolina, specifically a little south of the city, near Garner. I'm a graphic designer at a marketing agency. I make $56,000 a year, which felt like a decent salary until I had 2 kids and realized that decent and enough are 2 very different words. I'm currently on maternity leave. Unpaid. My 6 weeks of short-term disability ran out and I've been burning through what little savings we had, trying to keep the lights on and the diapers stocked while my body tries to remember what it felt like before it grew an entire human being for the second time. My husband Kyle is 32. He's a project manager at a civil engineering firm. He makes $81,000. He's a good man. I need to say that up front because by the time I finish telling this story, some of you are going to want me to divorce him, and I need you to understand that what happened wasn't about him being a bad husband. It was about him being a weak son. There's a difference. I didn't always know that, but I know it now. We've been married 4 years. We have 2 kids. Our son Beckett is 3, and he's at that age where he asks, "Why?" after literally every sentence you say, including, "I love you." Our daughter Iris is 11 weeks old. She's the reason I was in the hospital. She's also, indirectly, the reason I almost lost my house. Let me back up. In 2021, Kyle and I bought a 3-bedroom ranch house in the Garner area for $310,000. We put down $47,000, and before anyone says, "Wow, nice savings," let me break that down. $22,000 of that came from my inheritance. My grandmother passed away in 2019. She was a retired school librarian who lived in a tiny house in Kinston and saved every penny she ever earned. She left me that money with a note that said, "Buy something solid, baby. Something nobody can take from you." I used it for the down payment on our house. Kyle contributed $25,000 from his own savings. Together, we made it work. The house is now worth about $395,000. We owe $248,000 on the mortgage. Monthly payment is $2,140. It's tight, but it's ours. Or at least, it was. Now I need to talk about Diane. Diane is Kyle's mother. She's 58. She's a retired paralegal from Cary. She's divorced from Kyle's father, who moved to Florida in 2018 and now exists exclusively as a birthday card that arrives 2 days late every October. Diane is the kind of woman who will reorganize your spice rack while you're in the bathroom and then act like she did you a favor. She has an opinion about everything. When I was pregnant with Iris and we were setting up the nursery, she wanted the walls painted sage green. I chose coral. She told me coral would overstimulate the baby. I said, "She's a newborn, Diane. She can barely see." She bought sage throw pillows and put them in the crib. I removed them because, suffocation hazard. She told Kyle I was being difficult. When we picked the name Iris, Diane strongly suggested, that we use Diane as a middle name. I said no. I'd already chosen the middle name June, after my grandmother. Diane said, "Well, I just thought it would be nice for the baby to carry something from both sides." I said, "She will. She'll carry Kyle's last name." Diane did not care for that answer. She once bought a Chico car seat and returned the Graco one I had already purchased and installed. She didn't ask. She just did it. When I confronted her, she said the Chico had better safety ratings. I looked it up later. They were rated the same. Kyle always described his mother as intense but means well. I described her as a woman who rearranges your kitchen when you go to the bathroom. We were both right, in our own way. But I think I was more right. When I was 38 weeks pregnant with Iris, I developed preeclampsia. My blood pressure was dangerously high. I was admitted to WakeMed and spent 9 days there before delivery. 9 days of lying in a hospital bed hooked up to a magnesium sulfate drip, being monitored every hour, trying not to stroke out, trying not to panic, trying to keep my baby alive inside me long enough for her to be safe. It was the most frightening experience of my life. During those 9 days, Diane came to our house to help. She watched Beckett. She cleaned. She cooked. She organized. Kyle was grateful. He was splitting time between the hospital and home, trying to keep our 3-year-old fed and alive while his wife was in a medical crisis. He was exhausted. He was scared. And his mother showed up and said, "I'll handle everything." He let her. Here is what Diane was actually handling. Update 1. What I found. 7 weeks after Iris was born, I was starting to surface. I was sleeping in 2-hour chunks. I was breastfeeding around the clock. I was managing a newborn and a 3-year-old who had recently decided that pants were optional and the word "no" was a personal attack. But I was trying to get things in order. I wanted to file for our homestead exemption. It's a property tax thing in North Carolina. You can do it online through the Wake County Tax Office website. To do that, I needed the deed to our house. I went to Kyle's filing cabinet. The deed wasn't there. I looked through every folder. I checked the kitchen drawer where we keep important papers. I checked the safe. Nothing. So I did what any reasonable person would do in 2025. I went online. I pulled up the Wake County Register of Deeds website and searched our address. What I found was not our deed. What I found was a quitclaim deed, filed 7 weeks prior, right around the time I was in the hospital, transferring our house into something called the Brewer Family Trust. Diane's last name is Brewer. Kyle's last name is Brewer. The trust was in the Brewer name. I read the document once. Then I read it again. Then I read it a third time because my brain simply would not accept what my eyes were telling me. The trust named Diane as the sole trustee. Sole trustee with full authority over the property. That means she could sell it, refinance it, transfer it to someone else, all without my knowledge, all without my consent. I was not mentioned anywhere in the trust document. Nowhere. Not as a trustee, not as a beneficiary, not even as a footnote. Kyle was listed as a beneficiary. Not a trustee. Not an owner. A beneficiary. Our children, Beckett and Iris, were listed as secondary beneficiaries. And buried in the dissolution clause was a line that said if Diane chose to dissolve the trust, the property would revert to her. To her. Not to us. Not to the children. To Diane. I put the baby in her crib. I walked into the bathroom. I sat on the floor. And I shook. For 20 minutes, I sat on the cold tile floor of my bathroom and my whole body trembled. Not from anger. Not yet. That came later. In that moment it was pure, animal fear. The fear of realizing that the ground beneath your feet does not actually belong to you anymore. Update 2. The confrontation. I confronted Kyle that night after Beckett was asleep. I put the county records printout on the kitchen table and I said, "Explain this." He looked at it. He looked at me. And I watched the blood drain from his face in real time. "She said it was estate planning paperwork," he said. "She said she was protecting the house for the kids, in case anything happened to us. She said, I repeated. And you just signed it." Nina, I was exhausted. I'd been up with Beckett for 3 days straight. You were in the hospital and every time I came to see you, your blood pressure was higher and the doctors were talking about emergency delivery and I was terrified. Mom came over and she had paperwork and she said it was to protect us and I didn't think. "You're right," I said. "You didn't think. You signed away our house. The house I put $22,000 into. $22,000 from my dead grandmother. While I was lying in a hospital bed with a blood pressure of 170/110, trying not to die. You signed it away at this kitchen table because your mother told you to and you didn't even read it." He didn't argue. He couldn't. There was nothing to argue. He had signed a quitclaim deed in our kitchen at 11 o'clock at night after a long day of solo parenting, and he had not read a single word of it. His mother had a notary present, a woman named Rhonda from Holly Springs, someone Diane knew from her paralegal days. It was all set up. All orchestrated. All Diane needed was Kyle's signature and my absence. She got both. Kyle called his mother that night. I listened from the hallway. Diane's response was calm. Practiced. Rehearsed in a way that made my stomach turn. "I was trying to help," she said. "You two are young. You don't have a will. What if something happened to both of you? The house would go through probate and the kids would have nothing. I set up the trust so the children are protected. I'm their grandmother. I would never do anything to hurt them." Kyle put her on speaker. I stepped into the room. I said, "Then make me co-trustee. Right now. Tonight. If this is about the kids, you'll have no problem adding their mother to the document." There was a pause. A long one. Then Diane said, "Let's not make decisions when emotions are high. We can revisit this in a few months when things have settled down." She never brought it up again. Update 3. The family response. Kyle's sister Meredith is 28. She works in pharmaceutical sales in Charlotte and has the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no by anyone who mattered to her. When Kyle told her what happened, she called me. "I think you're overreacting," she said. "Mom was a paralegal for 20 years. She knows what she's doing. She's trying to protect the family. She's trying to control the family," I said. "There's a difference." Meredith laughed. Actually laughed. "Same thing in our family," she said, and she said it like it was charming. Like Diane's need to control every person and situation around her was a quirk instead of a pathology. I called my mother next. My mom, Gloria, is 57. She lives in Wilmington. She's a retired high school English teacher who raised me and my brother alone after my dad died when I was 12. She is not a dramatic woman. She is not a woman who panics. She once watched a tree fall on her car during Hurricane Florence and said, "Well, that's inconvenient," and then called the insurance company. When I told my mother what Diane had done, she went silent. For 10 full seconds, she didn't say a word. Then she said, "Nina, you need a lawyer. Today. Not tomorrow. Today. That woman does not have your family's best interest at heart. She has her own." I started crying. My mother said, "Cry later. Call a lawyer now." So I did. Update 4. The lawyer and the legal battle. A coworker at my agency had used a real estate attorney for a boundary dispute the year before. She recommended a woman named Laura Chen. I called her office the next morning. Her consultation fee was $350, which felt like a lot when you're on unpaid maternity leave, but also felt like nothing compared to the $395,000 house that had been signed out from under me. I brought everything to Laura's office. The trust documents. The quitclaim deed. The county records. Our original deed. The mortgage paperwork. I laid it all out on her conference table like evidence in a crime procedural, because that's what it felt like. A crime. Laura reviewed everything. She took her time. She read each document carefully, made notes, cross-referenced with county records on her computer. Then she looked up from the paperwork and took off her glasses. "Your name was on this deed," she said. "The transfer of this property into the trust required your signature or your explicit, documented consent. You gave neither." She paused. "This is voidable." I cried in Laura Chen's office. Not from relief. Not from joy. From sheer, bone-deep exhaustion. I'd been running on 3 hours of sleep a night for 11 weeks. I'd been breastfeeding every 2 hours. I'd been managing a 3-year-old who had just learned to open the refrigerator by himself. And I'd been carrying the weight of discovering that my mother-in-law had legally maneuvered the deed to my house, my grandmother's money, my family's home, into her own name while I was in a hospital bed being pumped full of magnesium to keep my brain from swelling. The relief of hearing, "This is voidable," didn't feel like a victory. It felt like surviving something I never should have had to survive in the first place. Laura filed a petition to void the trust and restore the original deed. She explained the process. It would go through the Wake County courts, but given the clear absence of my consent and the circumstances under which the deed was transferred, she expected it to move relatively quickly. She also told me something that made me sit up straighter. The notary who witnessed this should have required both owners' signatures for a property transfer. The fact that she didn't raises serious questions about her professional conduct. We may want to file a complaint with the North Carolina Secretary of State. Diane was served papers at her condo in Cary on a Tuesday morning at 9:15 a.m. I know the time because Kyle's phone rang at 9:22. Diane didn't yell. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She was calm. Controlled. The same tone she'd used when she told us the trust was for the children. "Your wife is suing me," she said. "I was trying to protect your children, Kyle. I was trying to make sure they'd be taken care of. I hope she knows what she's doing, because once lawyers get involved, things change. Relationships change." And Kyle, my exhausted, conflict-avoidant, well-meaning husband who had spent his entire life nodding along to whatever his mother said, did something I did not expect. He said, "Mom, she's protecting our children. From you." I was standing in the kitchen holding Iris. I heard him say it through the phone. He was in the living room. His voice didn't shake. He didn't stammer. He said it clearly and directly, and then he said, "I should have read what I signed. That's on me. But you knew exactly what you were putting in front of me. That's on you." Diane hung up. She didn't speak to us for 3 weeks. Update 5. The resolution. 21 days of silence. No calls. No texts. No unannounced visits with briskets or unsolicited opinions about pacifier brands. For 3 weeks, our house was quiet in a way it had never been quiet. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me felt free. Most of me was too tired to feel much of anything beyond the relentless rhythm of feed the baby, change the baby, put the baby down, pick up the toddler, feed the toddler, read to the toddler, collapse. Then, on a Saturday morning, our doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen warming a bottle. Beckett was watching Bluey. Kyle was in the shower. I carried Iris to the door and opened it. Diane was standing on our porch holding a foil-covered baking dish and a pink envelope. She was wearing a nice blouse. Her hair was freshly done. She looked like she'd prepared for this the way she prepared for everything, deliberately, strategically, with attention to every detail. She looked at Iris. The baby was nestled against my chest in a wrap, her tiny hand curled around the fabric. Diane's eyes filled with tears. Real tears. The kind you can't rehearse. "Can I hold her?" she asked. Her voice cracked on the word, hold. I looked at my mother-in-law. I looked at this woman who had rearranged my kitchen and returned my car seat and lobbied for her own name on my daughter's birth certificate. This woman who had walked into my home while I was fighting for my life in a hospital and quietly, methodically, legally transferred my house into her own name. Who had handed my exhausted husband a document he didn't understand and watched him sign it. Who had used her 20 years of paralegal knowledge not to help us, but to help herself. I said, "You can hold her. But you can't hold the deed." Diane blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She didn't have a response for that. For perhaps the first time since I'd known her, Diane Brewer did not have a prepared answer. I stepped aside and let her in. She held Iris on the couch for about 20 minutes. She didn't bring up the lawsuit. She didn't bring up the trust. She commented that Iris had Kyle's nose and my eyes, and I said, "She does." She asked how Beckett was doing, and I said, "He learned the word 'actually' and uses it in every sentence." She almost smiled at that. Almost. She left the brisket. She left the card, which had a $100 bill inside and was signed simply, "Love, Grandma." I put the money in Iris's savings account. I put the brisket in the fridge. 6 weeks after Laura filed the petition, the trust was dissolved. It wasn't dramatic. There was no courtroom scene, no judge slamming a gavel. Laura had sent Diane's attorney. Yes, she hired one, a man from Apex who looked like he wished he were anywhere else, a detailed letter outlining the legal deficiencies of the trust transfer. The lack of my signature. The lack of my consent. The circumstances under which Kyle's signature was obtained. Laura also mentioned, politely but firmly, that the alternative to voluntary dissolution was a fraud hearing. The word fraud did a lot of heavy lifting in that letter. Diane agreed to sign. The dissolution happened at our kitchen table. The same kitchen table where, months earlier, Diane had spread out the quitclaim deed and stood over Kyle while he signed it at 11 o'clock at night. There's a kind of poetry in that, I suppose. Or maybe it's just geography. Houses only have so many tables. A notary came. Not Rhonda from Holly Springs. A different woman, someone Laura's office had arranged. She was young, professional, and completely oblivious to the weight of what was happening in the room. Diane signed every document Laura put in front of her. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't make a speech about protecting the grandchildren. She signed with the same careful penmanship she probably used on legal documents for 20 years, and she set the pen down, and she folded her hands in her lap. Nobody spoke. The notary stamped the last page, gathered the documents, and said, "All done," with a brightness that felt almost violent in that quiet room. Kyle walked her to the door. Diane sat at the table for a moment, looking at her hands. Then she stood up, picked up her purse, and left through the garage door without saying goodbye. The deed was restored to our names. Both our names. Nina and Kyle, joint tenants with right of survivorship. Exactly as it should have been all along. Exactly as it was before Diane decided she knew better. That night, after I put both kids to bed, Beckett after 3 stories and a negotiation about whether his stuffed dinosaur needed its own pillow, Iris after a 9 p.m. feed, I went out to the back porch. Kyle was already there, sitting in one of the cheap Adirondack chairs we'd bought at Lowe's the summer we moved in. He had a beer. He didn't offer me one. He knew I wasn't drinking while breastfeeding. We sat there for a while without talking. The crickets were deafening the way they get in North Carolina in the early fall, when the air is still warm but the light is starting to change. The neighbor's dog barked twice and then stopped. "I'm sorry," Kyle said finally. "I should have read what I signed." "You should have," I said. "I should have known she would do something like that." "Maybe." I should have. Kyle. I turned to look at him. He looked tired. Not just tired from the baby. Tired from the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from realizing your mother is not who you thought she was. Or, more accurately, from realizing she's exactly who you thought she was and choosing not to see it for 32 years. You should have done a lot of things. But you also stood up when it mattered. You told her the truth. You didn't take her side. That shouldn't be the bar, he said. No, I said. It shouldn't. But it's where we're starting. We sat there a while longer. The monitor on my phone lit up, Iris stirring in her crib, making those little newborn grunting noises that sound like a tiny angry old man. I watched the screen. She settled. Then she didn't. Her face scrunched up, and I could see the cry building before I heard it. I stood up. I've got her, I said. I went inside. That was about 5 weeks ago. Things are not perfect. I don't know if they'll ever be what I would call perfect. But they're better. Or at least clearer. Diane still visits. But she calls first now. She doesn't show up unannounced with casseroles and opinions. When she comes over, she plays with Beckett and holds Iris and comments on the house in ways that I know are her restrained versions of criticism. Have you thought about new curtains for the living room? And I smile and say, I like the ones we have. And she doesn't push it. She's learning where the line is. Slowly. Reluctantly. But she's learning. Kyle started reading every document before he signs it. Every single one. He read the warranty on a blender last week. I didn't tell him he was overcompensating. I let him read. I check the Wake County Register of Deeds website once a week. I have property alerts set up for our address. If anything changes, anything at all, I get an email. Laura Chen told me this was probably unnecessary. I told her that a lot of things that should have been unnecessary turned out to be very necessary in my life. Meredith still thinks I overreacted. She called me last week to tell me about a trip she's planning to Asheville and casually mentioned that Mom is still really hurt by everything. I said, I hope she takes the time she needs to process that. Meredith didn't know what to do with a response that wasn't an apology. She changed the subject. My mother, Gloria, still thinks Diane is dangerous. I think she's somewhere between dangerous and sad, which might be the most dangerous combination there is. Gloria told me to change the locks. I told her we did. She said, change them again. I love my mother. The brisket, by the way, was actually good. Really good. Diane slow smokes it for 14 hours and uses a brown sugar rub that I would genuinely like the recipe for. I will never tell her that. Some things are better left unsaid. Some things, like the recipe for your mother-in-law's brisket, and the fact that you almost lost your house because you married into a family that confuses love with control, are better kept to yourself. I'm going back to work in 3 weeks. Kyle and I have an appointment with an estate planning attorney. A real one we chose together, one who will draft actual wills and actual trusts with both of our names on them. We're also looking into couples counseling, because there's a conversation underneath all of this that we haven't fully had yet. The one about boundaries. The one about what it means to be a family that you chose versus the family you were born into. The one about what happens when those two things collide in your kitchen at 11 o'clock at night. But that's for later. Right now, Iris is crying and Beckett wants to know why the moon doesn't fall down and the mortgage is due on Friday and I need to update my portfolio before I go back to work in the house. My house, my name on the deed, my grandmother's money in the walls, is still standing. And it's mine. Edit. Thank you for all the messages. I'm reading everything. To clarify a few things, yes, we are pursuing the notary complaint. Laura filed it with the NC Secretary of State's office. No, I'm not divorcing Kyle. Not right now. We're working on it. And to the person who asked if Diane has done anything like this before, I honestly don't know. But I'm looking into it. I'll update if anything changes. Edit 2. Iris just smiled at me for the first time while I was reading your comments. A real smile, not a gas smile. I needed that today. Thank you.